News 2 presents To the Point.
Our first point today, a South Carolina congressman is under fire for his connections to the January 6th riots. Coming up, we break down what the future could hold for Representative Ralph Norman. Second point, we're just weeks away from the state of South Carolina's legislative session. We have two state lawmakers here in studio, one a veteran, one a newcomer. And later, a new Charleston County councilman is joining us in studio to talk about his priorities going into the new year. Good Sunday morning. Welcome to the Point. This is the show where we break down the political issues and elections that matter to you. I'm Riley Benson. Local political leaders are calling for the immediate resignation of South Carolina Congressman. This comes after the release of text showing Congressman Ralph Norman in communication with former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in January of 2021. The message is exclusively obtained by Talking Points memo, includes Norman calling for then President Donald Trump to invoke martial law to prevent President Biden from moving into the Oval Office. The York County Democratic Party calls Norman, quote, a domestic enemy of the United States Constitution. They want other GOP leaders to condemn his remarks. John Bersini joining us now. John, thank you so much again for, of course, being on the show every week. John, we're talking about Congressman Ralph Norman and these text messages he sent to Mark Meadows. And so, a number of people now calling for his resignation. What does this mean for not only Congressman Norman, but, South Carolina and our country?
Well, certainly it doesn't look good right now for Congressman Norman. Anytime anyone calls for your resignation and they've got a bona fide reason behind that, you sort of makes you stop and scratch your head. We've never seen these type of events unfold. January 6th in and of itself was unprecedented, and the more it seems like we unpack from that day, the more we're finding out that's disturbing.
So obviously a lot of up in the air at this point. So what are the likelihoods that you could see the congressman resign? Does he survive this? Kind of what does the future really look like for Congressman Norman?
Well, for the congressman, probably a lot of this is going to depend on who calls for his resignation. You and I both know that if you can sort of beat the media cycle and let the media move on to this next story, and you're still there, you stand a pretty decent chance of remaining there. If it really starts to ramp up and you get some very senior members of the Republican Party, for example, that are telling him, you want to know what, this is a bridge too far, we need to rethink this, you need to go, that certainly I think would change his perspective.
On the flip side, we've talked about it heavily on this show, is former President Donald Trump has announced that he's running. So where does this play into his bid for president? Again, does this hurt him? Does this help him? And does that kind of attach itself to Congressman Norman?
So for the Trump base, again, this isn't going to matter. Again, they're behind him 100%. I don't think anything really could sway their mind. For some of the undecideds, though, this is continual fuel for the fire, right, and additional cause for concern. It'll be interesting to see how this really plays out.
John, any final thoughts on this issue with Congressman Norman?
Well, stay tuned. This probably isn't over quite yet. It'll be interesting to see how this develops. And again, it's hard to believe we're already talking about the 2024 presidential election.
John, something we're going to watch here on To the Point. Now, we're just weeks away from the beginning of the 2023 legislative session in the State House. Now we're hearing from representatives who will be in charge of making laws for our state in the coming years. Senator Marlon Kimpson joining our show. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, we're just a couple weeks from the legislative session kicking off South Carolina. So we want to talk about some of the goals and aspirations, things that you think might come up during this legislative session this year.
Well, first, let's rehash what we did last year.
Sure.
It's a shame that the bodies, both bodies really, spent as much time as we spent on hot button issues that preoccupied us from getting to the real issues of the people of South Carolina. As you know, we spent a significant amount of time on abortion. And not only in the regular debate, but the issue predominated the budget debate. And so I'm hoping between abortion and banning transsexual or transgender students from high school sports, which, by the way, at best, there were only 5 cases documented in the state of South Carolina. We can finally move on to the people's business. Well, what is the people's business? And I think that's your question. If you look at the pre-files, there are a number of constitutional referendums that senators are asking for the people of South Carolina to decide. One is the use of marijuana for medical purposes. We've seen these referendums all across the country. And unfortunately, our General Assembly has been polarized on the issue. We passed Tom Davis's bill. I was a member of that subcommittee in the Senate, but it got blocked in the House. The other issue that I think you'll see is whether or not we should finally join the majority of states that have had the ability to expand Medicaid. South Carolina ranks one of the lowest poverty indexes in the country. We rank very high when it comes to people who don't have health care. Even Mississippi, and I use Mississippi, we pick on Mississippi in the General Assembly, and other southern states that have similar metrics have recognized that you take free federal money to provide for the care of your citizenry. The other issue that's going to be a referendum sponsored by Senator Darrell Jackson is raising the minimum wage. There are arguments, pros and cons. I am personally for it. The rich have gotten richer, and that includes many in this studio. But the poor have gotten poorer, and the middle class can't find a way without working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet. It does not in the states that have passed. There's no great exodus out of the state, despite what the governor and many other Republican legislators say. We need to spend time on the people's business and address raising the minimum wage, the quality of life. Housing is another issue. I got a inclusionary zoning bill. Will be back on the mark this year, and we can talk about that some more.
Senator Kempson, you know, we got about a minute left, so I just want to kind of ask you, what are some of your goals? What are things you want to see happen this year, things that you're maybe hopeful that will happen?
Well, I appreciate the question, and you know, I'm the senator that represents more of Charleston County than anybody else. Right. And so one of the big issues is housing. The average cost of a house in Charleston County now is almost $400,000 and going escalated. We got to find a place for the missing middle to live in downtown Charleston that permeates through working, services. People who work in certain places don't need to live in Orangeburg to work in Charleston County. One of the pet peeves, and this may not sound good to a lot of people, but we got to get these doggone golf carts off major thoroughfares. It's dangerous. We need more golf cart regulation, and I'm going to be fighting for that. And then, of course, safe streets. I live in the Hampton Park area. We're getting too many people injured, particularly during the school times. So we need to have a better comprehensive plan where we work with the city, the county, and DOT to make sure that people can go and come. I'm excited about what Ernest Andrade is doing over at the Charleston Tech Center. Look for Morrison Drive corridor to continue to expand businesses. We got to do something in North Charleston to continue the economic growth and get the gun violence down that's really paralyzing the safety of our citizens.
Senator Kempson, thank you so much for joining us here on To The Point.
Good to be with you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right.
Next on News 2.
When we come back, we're hearing from another state lawmaker who's a newcomer in Columbia. In a few minutes, we'll hear from Representative Jordan Pace.